of 36y to the 10th. We have a couple options. Option 1 that always works right is we can prime factor 36. Okay, but if we're looking at this, what is the square root of 36? 6. So do we need to prime factor 36 to know what the square root of it is? No. What did we say we would do with y to the 10th? How do we decide that one?
These are notes for today.
These I won't be grading as notes. I'm just giving you info that you will probably want to have your quiz. Right, so if we look at pairs, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs. Some of you have said to me, well, can't I just divide that exponent by 2? Well, yeah, that's how we find pairs in something. Right, pairs is dividing by 2.
Will we have the same questions?
They won't be the same questions, but they'll be the same type. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs. So those come out in front of the square root. Is there anything left over to put inside the square root?
No.
No. So our answer is just 6y to the 5th.
Wait, hold on.
If you said you forgot or you didn't realize that the square root of 36 was 6, if you were to prime factor it, you'd get a 2 times a 2 times a 3 times a 3. And when you circle those pairs, you would still end up with a 6. Okay? Number 2 on your practice quiz is a non-perfect square. Okay, so if we want to do the square root of 108 and we want to get it simplified, sorry, I meant to put number 2, square root of 108. What do we do to simplify the square root of 108? Right, we start doing our factor tree. So we'll start prime factoring this. Doesn't matter what you pick as long as you are mathematically correct. So if you picked a different value here, that would be okay. The key is that we have to get it prime factored all the way down to primes. Okay, so once we're here, we have a 2 times a 2 times a 3 times a 3 times a 3. What do we have pairs of?
2 and 3.
2 and 3. Whatever we have a pair of goes out in front.
Yeah.
Whatever we do not have a pair of stays inside. So this counts 1 time, this counts 1 time. So we would get a 6 square root 3. That's pretty straightforward, right? To enter that in Alex, there shouldn't be any issues there. Whatever we have a pair of comes outside. So this 2 comes outside 1 time. This 3 comes out 1 time. This is still left over inside, and anything in the same place gets multiplied. Okay.
You can help us on our practice quiz, right?
Under practice quiz, I can help you, yeah. Number 3 is the same thing as number 2. So you're still going to be prime factoring and simplifying a square root there. Number 4 is one that you are going to be solving a quadratic when it is already in factored form.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to do the factoring. It is already factored for you. Okay, so we said last week that if we multiply 2 things together, I'll write it down here in a second. If we multiply 2 things together and it equals 0, either the first multiple has to be 0 or the second multiple has to be 0. So if we have 4v plus 1 times 7 plus v equals 0, right? This is 2 things getting multiplied together. Okay, whether it's 2 things being multiplied together, right, or 100 things being multiplied together, that equals 0. To solve it, we take each multiplied, and we set each of those equal to 0. So right here's our first one, here's our second one in this situation. So we will say 4v plus 1 equals 0. And we will say 7 plus v equals 0. Right? I'm just taking the two things that are being multiplied, and then this comes down to just solving a basic one-step equation. Right? So there are a few things that I had you work on at the very beginning of the trimester that were review from Algebra 1-1. Okay? Some of them are like solving basic equations. This is why we still have to have those skills. Right? So we should know from last year that we can just solve this by inverse operations. Okay, we'll solve this one over here with inverse operations. Okay, and we get two things that v can equal. So some of you have got to this, some of you are not, but just to make sure, when we are entering this in ALEKS, it is this piece, or you can type the comma in, you put a comma in between the two answers. So we'll say v equals -1/4, comma, -7, right? Those are the two options it can be. Now, if maybe, for example, this had a 2v out here in front of it, we would just also set a 2v equal to 0, and then solve that one. Right? It doesn't matter. It's however many things are being multiplied are all of the different answers that you get. You just set them each equal to 0 and solve them. Okay? Questions on that one? Okay, then we start getting into solving things with the quadratic formula. Some of them you can choose to solve with the quadratic formula. Some of them you can choose to solve by taking a square root. Some of you might choose to factor. Okay, I think the majority of you, for number 5, will decide to use the quadratic formula. Okay, if you cannot easily find the quadratic formula in your notebook, and you don't have it memorized, if you're asking me what is the quadratic formula, write it down like on the last page of your notebook so it's easy to find. I won't be able to tell you like on your final exam, so make it somewhere that it's easy to find and access. Okay, but the quadratic formula says -b, which we really sort of read as the opposite of b, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. For the quadratic formula to work, what does the problem have to equal? 0. So if it doesn't equal 0, rearrange. What does a equal on this problem? 4. What does b equal? 12. -12. So this says 4x if you can't see it. Can't see it, we might need glasses, but a is 4, b is -12, c is 0, because we don't see a constant. So we'll start plugging in. If b is negative, what is the first thing we're going to write here? Positive 12, right? The opposite of it. So we'll say +12. How important are these parentheses? Very. So we'll get here. What do we do next?
You do this stuff under
this stuff here, right? So we'll put that in our calculator and we'll get this stuff here. So that will give us another color. color so we can tell where we're at. 12 plus or minus the square root of 144. That's what you should get out of your calculator. All over 8. Then what do we do?
Square root of 144.
Take the square root of 144, which is 12.
Bless you.
She didn't sneeze.
So then we'll say 12 plus or minus 12 all over 8. No square root is left, so we can calculate both of those options. Sorry guys, my throat's scratchy.
Stuff good.
So we'll have a 12 plus 12 over 8, and a 12 minus 12 over 8. Right, if you're typing that into your calculator, you have to make sure you're doing 12 plus 12 equals
24 divided by 8.
24, and then divided by 8.
3.
Which will give you 3. 12 minus 12 equals 0. Divided by 8 is 0.
Becomes 0.
Yes, Bailey.
My question is, how is it possible to get 144 out of your square root if you have a 0?
Because order of operations, right? 12 squared is 144.
Yeah.
4 times 4 times 0 is 0. So 144 minus 0 is 144. Some of you are just making the choice right now to not help yourself. I am basically giving you the quiz right now.
I'm doing
Yeah, you are. Okay, as we start going through, then all of these are quadratic. So I'm just going to show you the different options here. This is the quadratic formula. It'll be just like the last one. 6 is just like number 5, quadratic formula. Number 7. Students miss this one because of a goofy reason. So let's make sure we talk about this one.
This is words instead of numbers.
No. You're just, it tells you. Solve x squared equals 16.
Don't you just take the square root?
Yeah, we just take the square root. So to undo an exponent of 2, we square root. But class, what is the square root of 16?
Plus or, don't you put plus or minus 4?
Plus or minus 4? How many answers is this? 2. This does not give you a plus or minus button. Because a lot of state testing and other situations, it won't give it to you. So you need to know that this is 2 answers. It's important that you understand.
So it's plus 4 and minus 4.
So you would put a 4 and a negative 4, right? Because we should understand that this is 2 different numbers. This has 2 answers. Okay, are we okay on that one? So just make sure you're getting that positive and negative option. Number 8. What does y equal? This is what I wanted to point out on this one, I forgot. What can we swap out y with? Do you remember?
X.
0.
Same thing.
So right, the original problem says y. Ugh, that's a terrible y. Sorry.
That's what I dropped.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay, so this is the original problem.
Oh.
So 0.
But this is the same thing as saying 0, right? This is like when we were looking at the graphing and we said that we could replace it with a 0. So you'll go here and you'll use the quadratic formula. Okay, it even tells you that it's quadratic to hint you at the quadratic formula. You'd have to finish solving that, obviously. There's only 9 questions. Okay, so say 9 is the same as 8. 9 is the same as 8.
Still could kill you.
Wait, that's
Wait,
not
what?
eight. There's
The lesser the questions, the more.
There are
it
9
gets
questions
you.
on this.
I don't
On
get
the
how to do it.
actual quiz.
What do you mean you don't get how to do it?
I don't get how to do it.
how to do this?
Yeah.
So if we know that this equals 0, that just says A equals 1,
Mm-hmm.
B equals -10,
Yep.
C equals 16.
Mhm.
And just start plugging into the quadratic formula.
So why does it say find all the zeros?
Because remember, zeros, x-intercepts, solutions are all the same thing.
We're just finding.
So it's just saying find the solutions. It's another way of saying find the solutions.
Oh, never mind. I'm not
Right? It's
Oh.
saying find the solutions, right? Because when we look at a graph, we said if we looked at a graph, and this was the picture we got, these zeros right here, these x-intercepts, were the same thing as the solutions. So that's what it's asking you.
Okay.
Okay?